Welcome to part 3. As I was saying, the effect of those, like a Trojan horse, are those 85 Conservative MPs not backing David Cameron and to have any role in negotiating. Of course, means that he's been put in a corner, and of course, what the Conservative MPs are really worried about, although. Uh, I'll go along the lines of whether there should be a referendum or not. It, the point is that they are more frightened that the EU will gain some kind of a democratic legitimacy, that there will be a elected EU president, that there will be more EU elections, and of course let us not forget that Guy Verhofstadt, who's in the European Parliament, a leader of one of the liberal democratic parties there, is trying to get more and more decisions made by the European Parliament. Okay, and more laws are being made by the European Parliament. Those members are directly elected by their own constituencies within the nations. Okay, now the EU Commission under Jose Barroso is not a political force. They do sit in the Parliament to listen, but they do not. They have no actual political power. They must do what the Parliament and the President of the EU, Herman Van Rompuy says, and also they must do what the different intergovernmental leaders such as Sarkozy, such as Merkel, such as the Hungarian Prime Minister or the Danish Prime Minister says. Now, because it is a 26-member club, it will soon be 27 members. So there is a tension between the intergovernmental idea of a common European market, which, as Niall Ferguson says, goes back to the 19th century in Germany and England. Okay, which may surprise some people because, of course, at the time the British Empire ruled a quarter of the world, but they were starting to believe in breaking down tariffs to have more free trade. Okay, and of course the Germans have wanted an economic community within Europe to prevent wars such as the 1870 war. That was the context of what they were trying to do, because of course the French invaded them, as the French and Russians did in World War One. But check out my video on the roots of World War One, which will be uploaded soon. So the problem for the transition of the European Union to a directly elected president with a directly elected cabinet and all the checks and balances that are within the German or constitution, which was based on the British constitution. And this leads me on to an extremely important point. After the Second World War, European Social Democrats and Pan-European Nationalists and Christian Democrats, those are the three main groups that represent the origins of the EU. And the Christian Democrats, of course, have origins that go back to Christian intelligentsia, the Lutheran movement, which of course started because of the printing press and the rediscovery of Lucretius's book on the origins of nature and matter, and Epictetus's book on the discourses, and Marcus Aurelius's on all about Stoic philosophy. This is what gave the work ethic, and this is what I was talking about in the first video about memes, how memes propagate themselves in different guises through the different ideas. Now, of course, there were National Socialists within the 1930s German and 40s government who wanted a European Union, but the idea that the post 1945 settlement of the war was created by those people is false. The European Union was set up by English Social Democrats and German Social Democrats through the university systems, and pan-European nationalists to create a European bloc that would be a bastion against the Soviet Union, to stop the Soviet Union, to prevent the re-emergence of National Socialism, which is basically an idea of melding the corporate power and labour unions with the state and subordinating corporate capitalists and economists to the service of the state. Now, of course, Adolf Hitler said there should be no private good before public good, and there should be no capitalist should own the land and unless in service of the nation and the state. I mean, those are socialist themes within National Socialism that you might say have carried on, through social democracy. But the idea that the EU is some kind of totalitarian force is not true. There is some degree of democracy, and when you say there's some degree of democracy, of course it's not a pure democracy, but even the Greek conception of democracy was not pure. Most of the people who did not vote were slaves, And this is the problem that Steve Keen, of course, talks about, because you're taking my example of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire failed because it had hyperinflation. Then there was a debt spiral, which caused them for people to opt out of work, and also basically a diminishing of the people because of a lack of equality between people in their wages, which of course undermined their military abilities, because it denied people food to build the muscles in a muscle orientated kind of warfare that the Romans were about, where you had to do long marches and everything else. It undercut their military power. Now, if people in our day and age don't have the ability to get fit or have a good education to understand economics, to understand science, to understand the need for patriotism and social democracy, and also maybe a united Europe, then we're going to start to lose our economic power and thus eventually our military power. The EU could be said to have been set up against the New World Order, the Exxon Haliburton, because they are for a kind of US hegemony, right? But that's not the US hegemony of Thomas Jefferson or even the first Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. It's a Zionist, exclusively Zionist, Freemasonry nationalism, right? They are not a nation in themselves. They are parasiting off the United States themselves. They're not even pro-Israeli, because of course the Israelis are Jews. They believe in God, whereas of course Freemasonry Zionists believe in the other guy. And to say that this is not a force in the world, of course, is not true, because because if you look at the Schiff banking family or others, the Rothschilds or Rockefellers are seen as the principal families, but they're not. They do not control Exxon and Haliburton. They are just business people. But those were the people who sent Lenin to Germany, and then the Kaiser, for his own reasons, sent them on to Russia, and of course Lenin and Stalin, who was not Jewish, but Lenin was, and Trotsky was, killed, or Zionists I should say, killed 65 million people. And Marx himself believed in that same ideology. He perverted the strands of socialism that came from the English labour movement and union movement to his own cause, and made it an ethnic ideology. Alright, so the fact that the Germans and English dominate the EU is very, very upsetting for the people who want to destroy European civilization, Western civilization. Of course, the racial aspect of it, the Nordic and Celtic people who created it. and the Roman people as well.